The mining ship Celestial Wanderer drifted through the asteroid belt of the Kepler 442 system, its hull scarred by micrometeorite impacts and decades of hard service. Captain Elena Vasquez watched the scanner displays with tired eyes, searching for the rare iridium deposits that would keep her crew fed for another month. The ship carried 23 souls, all human refugees from the corporate wars that had ravaged Earth colonies. Contact on long-range sensors called out Marcus Chun from the navigation station. Unknown vessel, bearing 27 Mark IV. It's big, Captain. Elena straightened in her command chair. Unknown vessels in this remote system usually meant trouble. Pirates, corporate enforcers, or worse. Put on screen. The main display flickered, revealing a massive alien ship unlike anything in human databases. Its bioorganic curves suggested living tissue rather than metal, with bioluminescent patterns pulsing along its surface like a heartbeat. The vessel was easily 10 times the size of the Wanderer, its purpose unclear but its power undeniable. "They're hailing us," reported communications officer Sarah Kim, her voice tight with worry. "Audio only, but the translation matrix is picking up the language. They sound distressed. Put them through." Static filled the bridge, followed by a series of musical tones that the universal translator converted into words. "Human vessel. This is Sanctuary Ship Blooming Hope of the Verdani Collective. We require immediate assistance. Our life support systems are failing. Please, we have children aboard." Elena exchanged glances with her first officer, Tom Bradley. The man's weathered face showed the same conflict she felt. They were barely surviving themselves, yet the desperation in that alien voice was unmistakable. "How many souls aboard your vessel?" Elena asked. 843, came the reply. "We are refugees fleeing the Kazakh Empire's expansion. Our ship suffered damage in hyperspace. We have perhaps 6 hours before complete life support failure." 6 hours. Elena's mind raced through the possibilities. The Wanderer had enough supplies for maybe 50 extra people for a few days, not hundreds for weeks. But leaving them to die wasn't an option either. "Tom, what's our cargo status?" "Mostly empty, Captain. We got about 40 tons of refined metals and our emergency supplies. The hydroponics bay could support maybe 30 extra people if we stretch it." Elena made her decision. "Verdani vessel, prepare to receive our docking tube. We'll transfer what supplies we can and see about temporary repairs." The next few hours blurred together in a haze of desperate activity. The Verdani were plant-like beings, tall and graceful with bark-like skin and leaves instead of hair. Their ship was dying around them, its bioorganic systems poisoned by some kind of hyperspace contamination. Dr. Reyes, the Wanderer's chief medical officer, worked alongside Verdani healers to understand the problem. "It's like a cancer," she explained to Elena during a brief break. "The hyperspace radiation is causing their ship's living tissue to mutate. They can't stop it with their current resources." Elena found herself face to face with the Verdani leader, an ancient being called Heartwood Eldest, whose bark bore the scars of centuries. Through the translator, their conversation carried an odd musical quality. "Your people show great kindness," Heartwood said. "We know humans have little reason to trust aliens. The galaxy has not been kind to your species since first contact." That was an understatement. Humanity's introduction to galactic civilization had been brutal. Other species saw humans as primitive, aggressive, and useful only as slave labor or cannon fodder. The corporate wars had started when human colonies tried to break free from alien economic exploitation. "We know what it's like to be refugees," Elena replied. "How long until you can repair your ship? With our current resources? 3 months, perhaps 4. Too long for our children." Elena felt a weight settle in her chest. 3 months' worth of supplies for 800 beings. It was impossible. Unless, what if we split up your people? My ship can take maybe 30, and we know other human settlements that might help. It's not much, but you would scatter our families across the void for strangers. Heartwood's photosynthetic patches dimmed with what might have been amazement. "Such sacrifice, we will not forget this kindness," Elena Vasquez of Earth. What followed was a masterpiece of logistics and sacrifice. Elena sent out emergency calls to every human settlement, mining station, and transport ship within 3 systems. The response was slow, but steady. The free trader Iron Dream could take 50 Verdani. The agricultural station New Eden had room for 100, though resources would be tight. The military patrol ship Defiant could manage 40 more, despite regulations. Dr. Reyes worked around the clock to create temporary life support systems compatible with Verdani biology. Engineer Santos and his team stripped non-essential systems from the Wanderer to help repair the Verdani ship's critical functions. Sarah Kim coordinated a complex dance of rendezvous points and supply transfers. Elena herself took aboard 37 Verdani, including 5 children whose large, luminous eyes reminded her of Earth's ancient forests. The ship's mess hall became a communal space where humans and Verdani shared meals of synthesized proteins and hydroponic vegetables. Language barriers crumbled as children played together, finding games that transcended species. One of the young Verdani, who called herself Bright Leaf, became fascinated with human music. Elena often found her in the observation lounge with Marcus, listening to classical symphonies and folk songs from a dozen human worlds. The child's leaves would flutter in rhythm, creating her own visual music. "Why do humans help us?" Bright Leaf asked one day through the translator. The Kazakh said humans only care for themselves. Elena knelt down to the child's level, choosing her words carefully. "Because everyone deserves a chance to grow and bloom. That's what makes us human." The separation of the Verdani families was heartbreaking, but necessary. Elena watched through the viewports as smaller groups transferred to various human ships, each departure marked by a complex harmony sung by those remaining behind. It was their way of saying goodbye, Hartwood explained, and of carrying memory across the void. The blooming hope itself was stabilized enough for short-range travel with a skeleton crew of 100 Verdani. They would make their way to a remote system where they could complete repairs over the following months. Elena provided them with detailed star charts and safe passage codes for human-controlled space. "We are in your debt," Hartwood said during their final meeting. "The Verdani do not forget kindness. Should your people ever need aid, you need only call our name among the stars." Elena accepted a small gift from the elder, a crystalline seed that pulsed with soft light. "It will grow into a memory tree," Hartwood explained, "so that your descendants will know of the bridge built between our peoples." As the alien ships departed, Elena stood on the bridge of the Wanderer and felt the weight of what they had done. Her ship was operating on minimal power, food reserves were critically low, and they were weeks away from the nearest human settlement. But watching the Verdani ships disappear into hyperspace, she knew they had done the right thing. "Think they'll really remember us?" Tom asked, studying the empty space where their guests had been. "I hope so," Elena replied. "Someday, humanity might need friends out here." She had no way of knowing how prophetic those words would prove to be. The weeks that followed were harder than Elena had anticipated. The Wanderer limped through space on minimal power, her crew rationing food and water while searching for viable mining opportunities. The ship's atmosphere recyclers, stressed by their recent overload, began showing signs of failure. Dr. Reyes worked overtime treating cases of malnutrition and the respiratory issues that came with poor air quality. But they survived as humans always did. They reached the mining colony of Prospector's Rest with barely a day's worth of life support remaining. The colonial administrator, a gruff former military officer named Henderson, listened to Elena's report with growing amazement. "You took on 800 aliens? Captain, that was either the bravest or stupidest thing I've heard in 30 years. "Sometimes they're the same thing," Elena replied. Word of the rescue spread through human space with surprising speed, not as headlines or official reports, but as stories shared in bars and transmitted in personal messages. The tale grew in the telling, taking on mythic proportions. The struggling miners who gave their last supplies to save alien children. The transport captain who violated corporate orders to help refugees. The colony that opened its doors to strangers from stars. For most humans, it was an inspiring story that would be forgotten within a year. But for the Verdani scattered across human space, it became something else entirely. It became the founding myth of a new relationship between species. In the agricultural domes of New Eden, Verdani refugees shared their knowledge of accelerated crop growth, helping the struggling colony triple its food production. The symbiotic relationship between Verdani biology and human technology created innovations neither species could have achieved alone. The children who have been saved grew up bilingual, serving as translators and cultural bridges. On the mining station Titan's Rest, Verdani geological senses proved invaluable for locating rare mineral deposits. Their ability to sense this song of living rock led to the discovery of the largest iridium vein in human space. The profits from that find funded expansion that turned a failing outpost into a thriving hub of commerce. The military patrol ship Defiant found their Verdani passengers possessed an uncanny ability to detect cloaked vessels, their plant-like senses picking up trace emissions invisible to human sensors. This capability proved crucial during several pirate encounters, saving both human and alien lives. But perhaps the most significant change occurred aboard the Wanderer itself. The 37 Verdani who remained with Elena's crew became integral members of the ship's operation. Bright Leaf, the child fascinated by human music, discovered she could optimize the ship's harmonic resonance systems by singing to them. Her musical understanding of frequency and vibration revolutionized their mining efficiency. Elena found herself learning the Verdani language, not through translation matrices, but through direct instruction from Hartwood's grandson, a young adult named Strongbranch. The musical nature of their speech challenged her in ways that human languages never had, requiring not just vocal sounds, but subtle shifts in body language and even electromagnetic field modulation. Your people have a concept in your literature, Strongbranch explained during one of their language lessons. The idea that kindness returns multiplied. We Verdani have lived this truth for millennia. Every act of compassion creates ripples that spread across time and space. Karma, Elena said. What goes around comes around. Yes, but more than balance. Kindness grows like a seed becoming a forest. Your small act of mercy may someday shade worlds. Elena smiled at the poetic nature of the translation, but she also felt the deeper meaning. The Verdani saw time differently than humans, thinking in terms of growth cycles that spanned centuries. To them, the rescue of their people was not a completed act, but the beginning of something larger. She had no idea how right they were. Years passed. The Wanderer became something unique in human space, a truly integrated ship with both human and Verdani crew. Elena's reputation as a fair and reliable captain spread, and she found herself carrying cargo for species that had never dealt with humans before. The trust extended by the Verdani seemed to act as a credential, opening doors that had been closed to humanity since first contact. The ship itself evolved as well. Verdani bioengineers worked with human technicians to create hybrid systems that combined the best of both technologies. Living metal that could self-repair. Organic computers that processed information through photosynthetic networks. Atmospheric systems that didn't just recycle air, but actively improved it. Dr. Reyes published papers on interspecies medicine that revolutionized xenobiology. Her work with Verdani healing techniques led to breakthroughs in treating radiation exposure and genetic disorders. The knowledge saved thousands of human lives across the colonies. Marcus Chun became one of the first human navigators certified in Verdani stellar cartography. Their method of reading space through gravitational harmonics proving more accurate than traditional sensors in certain situations. His hybrid navigation techniques reduced travel time by up to 30% on some routes. Sarah Kim developed new communication protocols that facilitated trade between species that had never successfully communicated before. Her translation matrices, inspired by Verdani linguistic concepts, became the galactic standard. But it was the children who represented the real change. Bright Leaf, now a young adult by Verdani standards, had become Elena's unofficial apprentice. Her unique understanding of both human technology and Verdani biosciences made her invaluable as humanity began to establish more permanent relationships with other species. The Kazakh Empire continues to expand, Strongbranch reported during one of their regular councils. His role had evolved from passenger to diplomatic liaison, keeping Elena informed of galactic politics. They have absorbed 12 more systems in the past solar cycle. The refugee crisis grows worse. Elena studied the star charts he had provided. The Kazakh were a militaristic species that conquered through overwhelming technological superiority. They enslaved or eliminated any civilization they encountered, taking resources and strategic positions while leaving devastation in their wake. The Verdani had been lucky to escape with their lives. How long before they reach human space? She asked. At their current rate of expansion? Perhaps 2 decades. Maybe less if they discover the trade routes you have been developing. 2 decades. Elena felt her age in that moment, the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. The Wanderer was just one ship, and she was just one captain. But she had learned something important about the nature of kindness and the ripple effects of compassion. "Then, we'd better get to work," she said. The memory tree that Heartwood Eldest had given her years before now grew in the ship's observation lounge, its crystalline branches pulsing with soft light as it recorded the memories of all who passed beneath it. Elena often found herself standing before it in quiet moments, wondering what story it would tell when she was gone. She had no way of knowing that the tree was already telling her story across the galaxy, its crystalline matrix broadcasting the tale of human kindness to every Verdani settlement in known space. Or that other species, some she had never heard of, were beginning to listen to those transmissions with growing interest. The seeds of something larger had been planted. Elena Vasquez, captain of a simple mining ship, had set in motion events that would reshape the galaxy. All because she had chosen compassion over pragmatism in a moment of crisis. The universe would remember, and the universe would repay. 15 years had passed since Elena Vasquez first encountered the dying Verdani ship, and the galaxy had changed in ways both subtle and profound. The Celestial Wanderer now served as flagship for a small, but growing alliance of species known informally as the Kindred Compact. What had begun as a simple act of mercy had evolved into something unprecedented in galactic history, a true multi-species coalition based on mutual aid rather than dominance. Captain Elena stood in the expanded conference room of her ship, now significantly larger thanks to modular Verdani bioextensions. Around the curved table sat representatives of 7 species, each one saved or aided by humans at some point during the past decade and a half. The room itself was a marvel of cooperative engineering, with atmospheric zones tailored to each species, needs seamlessly blended through Verdani biotechnology. The Kazakh advance has accelerated, reported Ambassador Keth9 of the Crystalline Hierarchy, her silicon-based form chiming softly as she spoke. The insectoid beings had been refugees from Kazakh strip mining operations when Elena's people found them 3 years ago. They have absorbed the Corvian Republic and are moving toward the Helix Nebula trade routes. Elena studied the holographic star map floating above the table. Red markers indicated Kazakh-controlled systems, and there were far too many of them. The Empire now controlled nearly a quarter of the local galactic arm, their expansion accelerating as they absorbed the industrial capacity of conquered worlds. "That's only 6 jumps from the Verdani sanctuary worlds," said Heartwood Eldest Daughter, Grove Mother Bright Canopy. She had grown into a formidable leader in her own right, coordinating refugee settlement and resource allocation across dozens of systems. "If they discover our shipyards, they'll have bioships to complement their war fleet," finished Captain Torres of the human vessel New Horizon. Elena's former protege had taken command of his own ship 5 years ago, following Elena's model of integrated crews. The technological advantage would be decisive. Elena nodded grimly. The Kazakh war machine was terrifyingly efficient, but it relied on conventional technology. The hybrid biotech developed through human Verdani cooperation represented a potential game-changer, which made the secret shipyards even more crucial to protect. The hegemony grows bolder as well, added Sonar Singer Deep Echo, the cetacean-like representative of the aquatic collective. His translation tank bubbled softly as he spoke. "Our deep space monitoring stations detect massive fleet movements in the Vegas sector." The hegemony were another expansionist power, less brutal than the Kazakh, but no less dangerous. They preferred economic conquest to military action, using trade leverage and resource dependency to gradually absorb other species. Humanity had been their original target until the corporate wars disrupted their plans. Elena felt the weight of leadership pressing down on her. Somehow, her simple mining ship had become the center of resistance against 2 galactic powers. The irony was not lost on her, especially when she remembered her original goal of just finding enough iridium to keep her crew fed. "What about the other powers?" she asked. "Any word from the Talkesh Union or the Federation of Rings?" Grove Mother Bright Canopy's photosynthetic patches dimmed, a sign of distress among her people. "Both maintain neutrality. The Talkesh say the conflicts of younger species do not concern them. The Federation claims they are too far from the expansion zones to worry." "Typical," muttered Chief Engineer Santos, who had been upgraded to Elena's senior staff. His hair had gone completely gray over the past decade, but his mind was sharper than ever. They'll wait until everyone else is conquered, then negotiate terms of surrender. Elena couldn't blame the older civilizations for their caution. The Talkesh had survived for millennia by avoiding entanglement in galactic conflicts. The Federation had learned hard lessons about the cost of intervention during the last Great War. But their neutrality left the younger species, including humanity, to face the expansion alone. "We need more ships," said Captain Torres bluntly. "Even with the biotech advantage, we're outnumbered 50 to 1. The Compact has maybe 300 vessels total, and most of those are converted civilian craft. The new shipyards at Verdani Prime will double production within 2 years," Grove Mother assured them. "But you are correct that time is our enemy." Elena stood and walked to the viewing port, gazing out at the unusual sight that had become commonplace around the Wanderer. Ships of a dozen different designs floated in loose formation, their crews cooperating in ways that would have been unthinkable a generation ago. Human vessels worked alongside Verdani bioships, crystalline hierarchy geometric constructs, and the flowing organic forms of aquatic collective craft. "We're missing something," she said suddenly. "The Kazakh and hegemony aren't just expanding randomly. There's a pattern." She returned to the holographic display, manipulating the controls to highlight recent conquest patterns. "Look at the systems they're targeting. Not the richest or most populated, but the ones with specific strategic value." Ambassador Keth9's crystalline form chimed with interest. "You speak of the ancient waypoints, the deep space navigation beacons left by the predecessor civilization." Elena nodded. The predecessors were a mystery wrapped in legend, an ancient species that had vanished from the galaxy millions of years ago. They had left behind only ruins and the network of quantum beacons that made long-range galactic travel possible. Control of those beacons meant control of interstellar commerce. If they're targeting the beacon network systematically, they're not just building empires, Elena said. They're preparing to divide the galaxy between them. The implications settled over the conference room like a cold wind. Control of the beacon network would allow both powers to dictate trade routes, communication lines, and military deployment across the entire galactic arm. Any species not aligned with one empire or the other will be cut off from galactic civilization entirely. The Talkesh maintained the primary beacon control station, Deep Echo noted, his translation tank bubbling with agitation, at the galactic core nexus. But they have remained neutral in this conflict. They won't stay neutral if someone tries to take their beacon station, Elena said. The question is whether they'll act before or after the empires make their move. Bright Leaf, now Elena's official first officer and the most experienced human Verdani translator in known space, had been silent during most of the discussion. Now she spoke up with a musical cadence that marked her bilingual nature. There's another possibility we have not considered. What if the expansion is not driven by normal imperial ambition? What if both powers are responding to some greater threat? Elena raised an eyebrow. What kind of threat? The deep space monitoring stations have detected anomalous readings from beyond the galactic rim, Brightleaf explained. Energy signatures unlike anything in our databases. The Verdani memory trees have been singing of darkness approaching from the void. Grove Mother Bright Canopy's branches rustled with what might have been fear. The old songs speak of such things. The dark times when the predecessors vanished. But those are myths, surely. The Crystalline Hierarchy archives contain similar references, Ambassador Keth9 added. Records of the Great Silence, when entire civilizations ceased their quantum transmissions overnight. Elena felt a chill run down her spine. The idea of something lurking beyond the galaxy's edge, something that might have driven the predecessors to extinction, was terrifying. But it would explain the sudden urgency in both the Kazakh and hegemony expansion patterns. If that's true, then we're fighting the wrong war, Captain Torres said quietly. Instead of preparing to face each other, we should be getting ready for whatever's coming from outside. Elena made a decision that would have consequences for the entire galaxy. We need information. Real data, not legends and speculation. Bright Leaf, can the Verdani memory trees be networked to create a historical analysis? Cross-reference everything about the predecessor disappearance. Yes, but it will require connecting trees across dozens of worlds. The computational power needed. Grove Mother paused, her photosynthetic patches brightening as she worked through the implications. It could work. A galaxy-wide neural network of memory trees, sharing data through quantum entanglement. Do it, Elena ordered. And while you're building your network, I want every ship in the compact scanning the galactic rim. If something's out there, we need to know about it before it arrives. Over the following months, the Kindred Compact transformed from a refugee protection organization into something approaching a galactic intelligence agency. Human technical expertise, combined with Verdani biocomputing and crystalline hierarchy data processing to create surveillance capabilities that rivaled those of the major powers. The memory tree network grew beyond anything previously imagined. Hundreds of crystalline trees on dozens of worlds linked their consciousness through quantum channels, creating a distributed intelligence that spanned light years. The network began processing historical data from every species in the compact, looking for patterns and connections that have been invisible to individual civilizations. Meanwhile, long-range survey ships pushed beyond the traditional boundaries of explored space. The modified vessels carried crews from multiple species, their different sensory capabilities providing comprehensive scanning data. What they found was disturbing. There are gaps, reported Captain Sarah Kim, now commanding her own exploration vessel, the Deep Explorer. Empty systems where our stellar cartography indicates there should be inhabited worlds. Not destroyed, not dead, empty. Like someone or something systematically evacuated entire populations. Elena studied the data from her command center aboard the Wanderer. The ship now served as the mobile headquarters for compact operations, its biotechnical enhancements making it the most advanced vessel in local space. The viewing screens showed the results of dozens of survey missions, each one painting a more ominous picture. How far do the gaps extend? She asked. At least 20,000 light years beyond the rim, Sarah replied. And they're moving inward, not fast but steady, like a wave of emptiness approaching the galaxy. The memory tree network chose that moment to announce its first major conclusion. Grove Mother Bright Canopy arrived in the command center with an expression of deep concern, her bark showing stress patterns Elena had learned to recognize. The network has identified the pattern, she said without preamble. The predecessor disappearance was not sudden. It took place over several centuries, with evacuations starting at the galactic rim and moving inward. But the records show something else. They were not fleeing war or disaster. They were fleeing something that consumed consciousness itself. Elena felt her blood run cold. What do you mean, consumed consciousness? The final predecessor transmissions speak of shadows that devour thought, entities that feed on sentience itself. Species that encountered them did not die. They became empty, their minds hollowed out while their bodies continued to function. The implications were staggering. An enemy that attacked consciousness rather than physical form would be unlike anything the galaxy had ever faced. Conventional weapons would be useless against beings that existed partly outside normal space-time. The Kazakh and Hegemony know about this, Elena realized. That's why they're racing to consolidate control. They're preparing for a siege, or preparing to sacrifice the outer systems to buy time for their core worlds, added Chief Santos grimly. Elena made another decision that would reshape galactic history. Standing before the assembled command staff of the Kindred Compact, she outlined a plan that was audacious beyond belief. We're going to unite the galaxy, she announced. All of it. Every major power, every minor species, every independent world. Because if we don't stand together against what's coming, we'll fall separately. The room erupted in protests and objections. Such a thing had never been accomplished in galactic history. The various species were too different, their interests too divergent, their prejudices too deep. Elena held up a hand for silence. 15 years ago, a dying alien ship asked for help, and a handful of human refugees chose compassion over self-preservation. Look what grew from that choice. Look around this room at species who had never cooperated before working together as equals. If we can do it on this scale, we can do it galaxy-wide. Brightleaf was the first to speak. The Verdani will support this path. Our memory trees already sing of the strength found in unity. Ambassador Keth9 chimed her agreement. The crystalline hierarchy values logical solutions. Unity against extinction is the most logical choice. One by one, the other representatives added their support. But Elena knew that convincing her existing allies was the easy part. The real challenge would be reaching out to the Kazakh Empire and the hegemony, convincing powers that had spent centuries conquering other species to suddenly become partners with them. We start with the neutrals, she decided. The Talkesh Union and the Federation of Rings. If we can convince them to support unity, it gives us leverage with the empires. And if the empires refuse? Asked Captain Torres. Elena's expression hardened. Then we stop them. The galaxy can't afford to be divided when the real enemy arrives. If the Kazakh and hegemony won't join us willingly, we'll have to force them to choose between cooperation and defeat. It was a declaration of war disguised as an offer of peace. Elena Vasquez, the mining ship captain who had saved a handful of alien refugees, was now proposing to challenge the two greatest powers in the galaxy. The audacity of it was breathtaking. But as she looked around at the faces of her allies, human and alien alike, Elena saw something that gave her hope. They believed it was possible. More than that, they believed it was necessary. The galaxy was about to discover what happened when humanity remembered a kindness and prepared to repay it on an unimaginable scale. The first domino had fallen 15 years ago when Elena chose compassion over caution. Now, the final pieces were moving into position for a transformation that would either save galactic civilization or destroy it in the attempt. Outside the viewing ports of the Wanderer, ships of the Kindred Compact began forming up for the most important diplomatic mission in galactic history. Elena watched them with pride and terror in equal measure, knowing that the choices made in the coming months would determine the fate of trillions of sentient beings. The universe had remembered their kindness. Now it was time to see if that memory could save them all. The diplomatic mission to the Talkesh Union was unlike anything Elena had ever undertaken. The ancient species maintained their capital at the galactic core, where gravity wells and radiation fields created natural defenses that had protected them for millions of years. No human had ever been invited to their inner system, and Elena's small fleet of 20 ships seemed impossibly tiny against the backdrop of such ancient power. Quantum Beacon Network shows massive traffic ahead, reported brightly from her navigation station. The young Verdani had grown into Elena's most trusted advisor over the years, her unique perspective bridging the gap between human urgency and alien patience. The Talkesh are definitely expecting us. Elena stood on the bridge of the Wanderer, now extensively modified with biotechnical improvements that made it one of the most advanced ships in known space. Through the viewing port, she could see the escort vessels of the Kindred Compact maintaining formation. Each ship represented a different member species, their crews working together in ways that still amazed dignitaries from older civilizations. Incoming transmission, announced Communications Officer Park, who had inherited Sarah Kim's position when she took command of her own exploration vessel. It's from the Talkesh Core Authority. Audio only, but the translation matrix is handling the conversion. Put them through. The voice that emerged from the speakers carried harmonics that suggested vast age and deep contemplation. The Talkesh communicated through quantum resonance patterns that the universal translator rendered into hauntingly beautiful tones. Human vessel, celestial wanderer, you are granted passage to Nexus Prime. Follow the beacon guidance precisely. Deviation from designated routes will result in immediate defensive response. The Council of Rings awaits your words. Elena had expected bureaucratic procedure from a species millions of years old, but the formal reception still impressed her. The Talkesh had ruled the galactic core since before most current species evolved intelligence. Their neutrality in galactic conflicts was legendary, as was their control of the quantum beacon network that made interstellar travel possible. The journey to Nexus Prime took 3 days through spaces that defied conventional navigation. Gravity wells twisted normal physics into impossible configurations, while ancient stellar engineering had turned entire star systems into defensive installations. Elena watched in fascination as artificial ring structures larger than planets guided their passage through corridors of controlled spacetime. The predecessors built this place, observed Chief Engineer Santos, studying the readings from their enhanced sensors. But the Talkesh have maintained it for eons. The level of technological integration is beyond anything we've seen. Elena nodded, making mental notes for the upcoming negotiations. The Talkesh commanded resources that dwarfed both the Kazakh Empire and the hegemony combined. If they could be convinced to abandon their neutrality, the balance of galactic power would shift dramatically. Nexus Prime itself was a revelation. The capital world existed at the center of an artificial star system, with the local sun contained within a Dyson sphere that provided unlimited energy. The planet's surface was covered in crystalline spires that reached into space, creating a three-dimensional city that extended from the core to low orbit. "By all the stars," whispered Captain Torres from his position on the secondary communication channel. "The entire planet is one massive computer. Every structure, every surface, it's all part of an integrated information processing network." Elena felt a moment of vertigo as she realized the implications. The Talcash hadn't just built a city or even a world-sized computer. They had created a planetary consciousness that had been growing in complexity for millions of years. The entity they would be negotiating with wasn't just an ancient species. It was a Gestalt intelligence of unimaginable scope. The docking procedure was surreal. Instead of conventional bays, their ships were guided into organic-looking chambers that sealed around them like living tissue. Breathable atmosphere was provided through networks of tubes that resembled circulatory systems. Elena realized that the station was literally alive, a fusion of technology and biology that made even Verdani bioships seem primitive by comparison. The greeting party consisted of 3 Talcash representatives, each one different from the others in ways that suggested specialization rather than genetic diversity. They were tall, graceful beings with skin that shifted color and texture in complex patterns. Their communication was direct neural interface rather than speech, requiring the most advanced translation technology the Compact possessed. "I am Nexus, singer of Deep Harmonies," the central figure communicated. "I speak for the Council of Rings in matters of galactic stability. You have come far from the Rim territories, Elena of humans. Your message suggested urgency regarding threats from the Void." Elena had prepared for this moment for months, but standing before beings millions of years old still tested her composure. "Honored Nexus Singer, we bring evidence of an approaching danger that threatens all sentient life in the galaxy. The same force that drove the predecessors to extinction is returning." The Talcash representatives exchanged rapid color pattern communications before responding. The archives of deep memory contain references to the Great Silence. But those events occurred in deep time before the current galactic civilization arose. "What evidence do you present that links past catastrophe to present circumstances?" Elena activated the holographic display she had brought, showing the data compiled by the memory tree network. "Our analysis of historical patterns reveals systematic evacuation of rimward systems, beginning approximately 1 million years ago and accelerating until the final predecessor transmissions. Current deep space surveys show the same pattern beginning again, with empty systems spreading inward from the galactic edge." The display showed a 3-dimensional map of galactic space, with red zones indicating areas where sentient civilizations had vanished without explanation. The pattern was undeniable, a wave of absence moving inward toward the populated core systems. "Furthermore," Elena continued, "we believe the recent expansion of the Kazakh Empire and the hegemony is motivated by advanced knowledge of this threat. Both powers are consolidating control of quantum beacon nodes in preparation for a siege that may last millennia." Nexus Singer's skin patterns shifted to what the translation matrix identified as deep concern. "If your analysis is correct, the implications extend beyond mere military threat. The entities that consumed the predecessors were described in the ancient records as consciousness eaters, beings that exist partially outside normal space-time." Elena felt a chill at the confirmation. Our memory tree network reached the same conclusion. Conventional weapons would be ineffective against an enemy that attacks sentience itself. "The Council of Rings has maintained neutrality for 3 million years, another Talcash representative communicated. "We have survived the rise and fall of hundreds of galactic civilizations by avoiding entanglement in temporal conflicts. Why should we abandon this successful strategy now?" Elena had anticipated this question and prepared her most important argument. Because neutrality only works when there are multiple sides to play against each other. If the consciousness eaters destroy or absorb all other galactic powers, the Talcash will stand alone against entities that consumed a civilization far more advanced than current galactic standard. The 3 representatives fell silent, their skin patterns cycling through complex configurations that might have been the visual equivalent of heated debate. Elena waited, knowing that rushing ancient beings was a sure way to trigger their defensive isolation. When Nexus Singer finally responded, the harmonic patterns carried undertones of decision. The Council of Rings will convene in full session to consider your evidence. This process requires one standard galactic month. However, we are prepared to offer immediate assistance with your next diplomatic challenge. Elena raised an eyebrow. Our next challenge. The Kazakh Empire has agreed to receive your embassy. However, their conditions are aggressive. They demand you present yourself at their capital world without escort, as a gesture of submission to their authority. It is clearly a trap. Elena felt her heart sink. She had known the Kazakh would be difficult to negotiate with, but demanding she walk into their hands alone was beyond reasonable diplomatic protocol. However, Nexus Singer continued, the Talkesh maintain ancient treaties regarding diplomatic immunity. If you accept formal designation as our representative, Kazakh honor will prevent them from harming you directly. The treaties are older than their empire and carry significant cultural weight. It was an unexpected offer of protection, and Elena realized the Talkesh were already beginning to abandon their neutrality. By extending diplomatic protection to the compact, they were taking a side in the conflict. I accept your designation with honor, Elena replied formally. But what about my ships? They will remain here as guests of the core authority. Your personal vessel may accompany you to Kazakh Prime, but no others. The enemy must not perceive this as a military threat. Elena spent the next 2 weeks preparing for what might be the most dangerous diplomatic mission of her career. The Talkesh provided cultural briefings on Kazakh society, a militaristic hierarchy based on strength and conquest. They respected only power and viewed compassion as weakness. Everything about their civilization opposed the cooperative principles the compact represented. The Wanderer departed Nexus Prime alone, carrying Elena and a skeleton crew toward the heart of enemy territory. The ship had been modified with the most advanced stealth and defensive systems available, but Elena knew that wouldn't help if the Kazakh decided to ignore their own diplomatic protocols. Kazakh space is unlike anything we've encountered, Bright Leaf reported as they approached the Empire's borders. Every system is a fortress. Military installations on every habitable world, orbital defense platforms around every star. This entire region of space has been turned into a war machine. Elena studied the sensor readings with growing unease. The scale of militarization was staggering. The Kazakh hadn't just built an empire, they had created a civilization entirely dedicated to conquest and war. The implications for negotiations were disturbing. Incoming transmission, announced Park. Kazakh Imperial Command is ordering us to follow their escort to the capital. Deviation will result in immediate destruction. A squadron of Kazakh warships materialized around them, their black hulls bristling with weapon systems. The vessels were purely functional, designed for killing rather than exploration or commerce. Elena felt a moment of doubt as she realized the vast gulf between her mission of unity and the mindset of beings who saw the universe only in terms of conquest and submission. Kazakh Prime was a monument to military power. The entire surface of the world was covered in fortress cities connected by transportation networks that doubled as deployment systems. Orbital stations provided interlocking fields of fire that could destroy any approaching fleet. The message was clear. This was a civilization that had never known defeat and didn't intend to learn. The audience chamber of the Kazakh Emperor was designed to intimidate. Vast spaces filled with war trophies from conquered worlds, walls carved with the names of defeated species, and a throne made from the hulls of enemy ships. Emperor Thax IX sat in mechanical armor that increased his already imposing height to nearly 4 meters, his multiple eyes glowing with predatory intelligence. So, the Emperor rumbled through translation systems that rendered his voice as barely controlled violence. The little mining captain comes to our capital to speak of unity. How amusing. Tell us, Elena of humans, why should the Kazakh Empire concern itself with the fears of prey species? Elena had practiced this moment, but standing before a being dedicated to conquest and war tested every diplomatic skill she possessed. Your Imperial Majesty, the threat approaching from the void consumes conqueror and conquered alike. The predecessors were far more powerful than current galactic civilization, yet they were driven to extinction. United, we might survive what destroyed them. Divided, we will surely fall. Emperor, Fax9's laugh was like grinding metal. You speak of unity while traveling under Talkesh protection. You gather weak species into alliance and call it strength. The Kazakh way is different. We grow strong by absorbing the resources of the weak. Elena saw the opening she had hoped for. Then absorb us, Majesty. Make the kindred compact part of your empire. Add our biotechnology and cooperative techniques to your military might. But make the choice quickly before the void entities arrive to consume us all. The Emperor's eyes focused on her with new interest. You offer surrender? I offer alliance. Your military strength combined with our technological innovations. Your command structure enhanced by our cooperative efficiency. The Kazakh Empire expanded to include every species willing to fight for survival. Elena held her breath as the Emperor considered her words. She was walking a razor's edge between convincing him of mutual benefit and triggering his predatory instincts to simply take what he wanted by force. Interesting, Emperor Thax9 finally said. But the Kazakh do not share power with inferior species. We rule, others serve. This is the natural order. Elena played her final card. Then, rule a galaxy united against extinction, rather than ruling over empty systems after the consciousness eaters finish their harvest. The choice is yours, Majesty, but the clock is already running. The Emperor's mechanical armor whirred as he leaned forward on his throne of ship hulls. You have courage, little captain, to speak so boldly in our presence. Very well, we will consider your proposal. But know this, if the Kazakh Empire joins your alliance, it will be as the dominant partner. All species will acknowledge our supremacy. Elena felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. The Kazakh were willing to negotiate, but their terms would be difficult for other species to accept. Still, any opening was better than outright rejection. We understand your position, Majesty. Perhaps we can arrange a meeting between yourself and representatives of the other major powers. The Hegemony, the Talkesh Union, the Federation of Rings. Let each faction present their proposals for facing the void threat. A gathering of powers, the Emperor mused. It has been long since such a thing occurred. Very well, Elena of humans. We will attend this conclave. But we warn you, if this proves to be some elaborate deception, the Kazakh Empire will demonstrate why we are the dominant military force in the galaxy. Elena bowed formally, following the cultural protocols the Talkesh had taught her. The meeting will be arranged at a neutral location. Thank you for your wisdom, Imperial Majesty. As she left the throne room, Elena felt the weight of what she had accomplished. The Kazakh Empire, the most aggressive military power in the galaxy, had agreed to participate in unity negotiations. But their demands for dominance would create new challenges with other species who valued independence. The real work was just beginning. Elena had managed to get the major powers to the negotiating table, but making them work together would require skills she wasn't sure anyone possessed. The fate of the galaxy now hung on her ability to forge cooperation between species that had spent millennia as enemies. Outside the palace, Kazakh military parades demonstrated the Empire's might. Elena watched formations of troops and war machines with professional appreciation for their efficiency, while privately wondering if such rigid hierarchy could adapt quickly enough to face an enemy unlike anything the galaxy had encountered before. The consciousness eaters were coming, and time was running out to build the unity that might save civilization itself. Elena Vasquez, who had started this journey by helping a few alien refugees, now found herself responsible for nothing less than the survival of the galaxy. The universe was preparing to test whether kindness could ultimately triumph over conquest, cooperation over dominance, and unity over division. Elena could only hope that the seeds planted by her simple act of compassion 15 years ago had grown strong enough to weather the storm approaching from the void. The Grand Conclave convened at Meridian Station, a massive diplomatic facility constructed at the gravitational balance point between three major star systems. The station itself was a marvel of cooperative engineering, built by multiple species over several centuries to serve as neutral ground for galactic negotiations. Now, it hosted the most important gathering in galactic history. Elena stood at the observation deck of the Wanderer, watching as ships from across known space arrived for the conference. Kazakh warships bristled with weapons despite diplomatic protocols. Hegemony vessels gleamed with precious metal hulls that displayed their economic power. Talkesh ships seemed to phase in and out of normal space, their quantum manipulation technology making them appear ghostly and ethereal. Final delegations are arriving, reported brightly from her position at the communication station. The Federation of Rings just came through the jump gate, and the Neutral Worlds Coalition is requesting docking clearance. Elena nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settling over her like a heavy cloak. She had spent months arranging this gathering, using every diplomatic contact and favor accumulated over nearly 2 decades of galactic travel. The fact that they had gotten this far was miraculous, but the real challenge was just beginning. Any word from the deep space monitoring stations? Elena asked. Chief Engineer Santos consulted his tactical displays, his expression grim. 3 more RIM systems went dark in the past week. Whatever's coming, it's accelerating. Elena felt a chill run down her spine. The consciousness eaters were approaching faster than their projections had predicted. The galaxy might have months rather than years before the wave of emptiness reached inhabited space. Then, we'd better make this work, she said quietly. The main conference hall was a triumph of diplomatic architecture. Circular tiers allowed representatives from hundreds of species to see and hear each other clearly, while translation systems provided real-time communication in over 3,000 languages. At the center, a holographic display could present information visible from any angle. Elena took her place as the designated spokesperson for the Kindred Compact, flanked by Grove Mother Bright Canopy of the Verdani and Ambassador Keth 9 of the Crystalline Hierarchy. Around the chamber, she could see the major power blocks taking their positions. The Kazakh delegation occupied an entire section, their military uniforms and ceremonial weapons making their presence unmistakable. The hegemony representatives wore robes that shifted color and pattern to display their wealth and status. The ancient Talkesh sat in contemplative silence, their crystalline forms seeming to resonate with barely audible harmonics. Emperor Thax9 himself had come, a sign of how seriously the Kazakh Empire was taking the threat. His mechanical armor had been polished to mirror brightness for the occasion, and his honor guard of elite warriors made it clear that diplomacy had its limits. Supreme Commercial Director Vex Allen led the hegemony delegation, her bio-augmented form showing the enhancement technologies that marked the highest levels of their society. The cybernetic implants that replaced much of her original biology allowed her to process vast amounts of information simultaneously, making her one of the most formidable negotiators in known space. The Talkesh sent Nexus Singer of Deep Harmonies along with 2 other representatives whose quantum resonance patterns suggested they spoke for different aspects of the galactic core civilization. Their mere presence indicated that the ancient neutrals were seriously considering abandoning their traditional isolation. Elena stood to address the assembly, activating the translation systems to ensure her words reached every delegation in their native language. The chamber fell silent as hundreds of different species focused their attention on the human mining captain who had called them together. Honored representatives of galactic civilization, Elena began, we gather today because of a threat that transcends the normal boundaries of our conflicts. The evidence compiled by the Kindred Compact, verified by Talkesh archives, and confirmed by deep space monitoring, indicates that an entity or entities from beyond our galaxy are approaching. These consciousness eaters, as the predecessor records name them, represent an existential threat to all sentient life. She activated the holographic display, showing the pattern of empty systems spreading inward from the galactic rim. Gasps and expressions of alarm rippled through the assembly as delegates saw the scope of the advancing emptiness. The predecessors were more advanced than our current civilization, Elena continued. They controlled the quantum beacon network we still depend on, had mastered technologies we barely understand, and ruled the galaxy for millions of years. Yet they were driven to extinction or evacuation by these entities. If we face this threat divided, we will share their fate. Emperor Thax9 rose to speak, his mechanical amplification system making his voice boom across the chamber. The Kazakh Empire acknowledges the threat, but we question the human proposal for unity. The galaxy has always been ruled by the strong. If these consciousness eaters come, let them face the might of Kazakh military power. We have never been defeated. Supreme Director Vex Allen's response came through neural link communication translated into harmonic patterns. The hegemony has conducted independent analysis of the threat. Our economic modeling suggests that unified resource allocation would increase survival probability by 37%. However, unity requires command structure. The most efficient model places economic expertise at the apex of decision-making. Elena had expected both major powers to demand leadership of any alliance, but she had prepared for this moment. The threat we face cannot be defeated by military might alone or solved through economic optimization. The consciousness eaters attack sentience itself, consuming the spark of awareness that defines life. Our response must combine every advantage we possess: Kazakh military efficiency, hegemony resource management, Talkesh ancient knowledge, Verdani biotechnology, and human adaptability. Nexus, singer of Deep Harmony, spoke for the first time, their quantum harmonics creating patterns of incredible complexity. The Talkesh have maintained detailed archives of the Great Silence. The entities approaching do not conquer in traditional sense. They consume consciousness while leaving bodies functional but empty. Defeated populations become extensions of their will, turned against remaining free civilizations. A wave of horrified silence swept through the chamber. The implications of an enemy that could turn conquered populations into weapons was staggering. Traditional military doctrine assumed that defeated enemies would simply be eliminated or enslaved, not transformed into active threats. This changes everything, said Representative Council Prime of the Federation of Rings, their multiple voices speaking in harmony through cybernetic linkage. Defensive strategies become meaningless if the enemy can turn our own people against us. Elena saw her opening. Exactly why we need unprecedented cooperation. No single species or empire has the tools to fight an enemy like this. But together, we might find solutions that none of US could discover alone. She activated another display, showing the technological innovations that had emerged from compact cooperation. Human Verdani biotechnology has created self-repairing ships and adaptive life support systems. Crystalline hierarchy data processing combined with Talkesh quantum manipulation could create defenses against consciousness attack. Kazakh military doctrine adapted with hegemony logistics could deploy resources faster than ever before possible. Emperor Thax9's multiple eyes focused on the technical specifications with obvious interest. These bioships show impressive damage resistance. But you speak of adapting Kazakh doctrine. We do not adapt to inferior systems. With respect, Your Imperial Majesty, Elena replied carefully, the consciousness eaters destroyed a civilization that considered our current military doctrine primitive. Adaptation isn't weakness, it's survival. Supreme Director Vexhallen interjected with rapid-fire analysis. Economic projections show that resource pooling increases defensive capability exponentially. However, command authority must rest with proven administrative systems. Hegemony oversight ensures optimal allocation. Elena felt the negotiations beginning to spiral into the same territorial disputes that had prevented galactic unity for millennia. She made a decision that surprised everyone, including herself. No single species will command the united defense, she declared. The threat is too great, and the required cooperation too complex for any one civilization to manage alone. I propose a rotating command structure with specialized authorities: Kazakh Tactical Command during military operations, Hegemony Resource Allocation for logistics, Talkesh Strategic Planning for long-term defense, and Integrated Species Councils for policy decisions. The chamber erupted in protests and objections. The idea of shared command violated every principle of hierarchy and dominance that governed galactic civilization. Elena waited for the chaos to subside, then played her final card. The alternative is extinction, she said simply. The consciousness eaters are approximately 18 months away from the outer inhabited systems. We can spend that time arguing about who should be in charge, or we can spend it building defenses that might actually work. Grove Mother Bright Canopy stood to support Elena's proposal. The Verdani memory trees have modeled thousands of scenarios. Only cooperative structures show positive survival probability. Competition and hierarchy invariably lead to defeat. Ambassador Keth9 added the support of the crystalline hierarchy. Logical analysis confirms optimal outcomes require distributed decision-making based on specialized expertise rather than traditional dominance hierarchies. Elena watched as delegates throughout the chamber began intense discussions among their own species groups. The concept of shared authority was revolutionary, potentially changing the fundamental nature of galactic civilization. But the approaching threat made radical solutions necessary. Captain Torres contacted Elena through private communication channel. Elena, are you sure about this? You're basically proposing to overthrow the entire galactic order. That order has kept us fighting each other for millions of years while real threats go unnoticed, Elena replied. Maybe it's time for something new. The debate continued for hours, with species after species raising objections to shared authority while simultaneously acknowledging that unity was their only hope of survival. Elena found herself moderating disputes between civilizations that had been enemies for centuries, trying to forge cooperation from the raw material of mutual distrust. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. The Neutral Worlds Coalition, representing hundreds of smaller species that had never been major galactic powers, proposed formal adoption of the compact model of governance. Their representative, an insectoid being called Hivesinger 1313, spoke with the authority of civilizations that had learned to cooperate out of necessity. Small species have always known that survival requires cooperation. 1313 buzzed through translation systems. The Kindred Compact has demonstrated that such cooperation can achieve results impossible for individual civilizations. We propose expanding this model to include all willing participants. Elena felt a surge of hope as dozens of smaller species voiced their support. The major powers might dominate the galaxy's military and economic resources, but the coalition of smaller civilizations represented the majority of galactic sentience. Emperor Thax IX recognized the shift in momentum. The Kazakh Empire will participate in this united defense, but our military superiority must be acknowledged. We will accept shared command only if Kazakh authority over combat operations is guaranteed. Supreme Director Vexhallen quickly added her conditions. Hegemony participation requires guaranteed control over resource allocation and supply chain management. Our economic expertise is essential for sustained operations. Nexus Singer of Deep Harmonies spoke last for the major powers. The Talkesh will provide strategic consultation and access to quantum beacon networks. However, we retain the right to withdraw if unity devolves into chaos. Elena looked around the chamber at hundreds of species that had spent millions of years in various states of conflict, competition, and isolation. They were still arguing, still protecting their interests, still instinctively distrusting each other. But they were also talking about working together against a common threat. Then, we have the framework for unity, Elena announced. Shared command based on specialized expertise, with participation voluntary, but commitment absolute. The United Galactic Defense will combine the strengths of every willing civilization to face the consciousness eaters. The formal vote took place over the following day, with each species delegation recording their decision for galactic history. The final tally was overwhelming. Over 90% of represented civilizations voted to join the United Galactic Defense, including all the major powers. Elena stood before the assembly as they concluded the most important diplomatic agreement in galactic history. The consciousness eaters may have destroyed the predecessors, but they're facing something the galaxy has never achieved before: true unity among all sentient species. They're about to discover what happens when the universe itself remembers a kindness. As the delegates dispersed to begin the massive task of coordinating galaxy-wide defense preparations, Elena felt both triumph and trepidation. They had achieved unity, but implementing it would test every cooperative skill they possessed. The consciousness eaters were still approaching, and 18 months was not much time to transform enemy civilizations into working partners. But for the first time since the threat was discovered, Elena allowed herself to feel hope. The galaxy had chosen cooperation over conquest, unity over division. Whatever came from the void would face not scattered, competing civilizations, but a united front unlike anything in galactic history. The seeds planted by a simple act of kindness 20 years ago had finally grown large enough to shade the entire galaxy. Now, they would discover if that shade was strong enough to shelter civilization itself from the darkness approaching from beyond the stars. The first wave of consciousness eaters arrived 6 months ahead of schedule, emerging from the void between galaxies like shadows given substance. Admiral Elena Vasquez, her mining captain days long behind her, stood in the command center of the UGD flagship Unity's Dawn as reports poured in from the Outer Rim monitoring stations. "Contact lost with observation post Theta 7, reported Commander Park, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what they were witnessing. Last transmission indicated complete crew mental shutdown within 17 minutes of initial contact." Elena studied the tactical display with grim concentration. The enemy didn't appear as traditional ships or recognizable technology. Instead, long-range sensors detected spatial distortions that seemed to absorb light and energy while radiating something that interfered with consciousness itself. The monitoring post-crews hadn't been killed. They had been emptied, their minds consumed while their bodies continued basic functions. Signal from the Kazakh battle fleet, announced Bright Leaf, now serving as Elena's chief of staff aboard the largest multinational vessel ever constructed. Emperor Thax 9 reports his forward units are experiencing mental static at ranges exceeding 1 light hour from enemy contacts. The Consciousness Eater's effect preceded their physical presence, creating zones where thought became difficult and awareness grew clouded. It was unlike any weapon system in galactic databases, attacking the fundamental nature of sentience rather than ships or planets. "Activate the Talkesh quantum barriers," Elena ordered. "Begin implementation of Protocol Unity 7. Protocol Unity 7 represented the culmination of 18 months of unprecedented cooperation. Every major species had contributed their most advanced technologies to create defensive systems designed specifically to protect consciousness from external attack. Talkesh quantum manipulation created barriers in multiple dimensions. Verdani biotechnology filtered hostile emanations through living neural networks. Human engineering adapted alien systems for maximum efficiency. The Unity's Dawn itself was a marvel of cooperative construction. Built simultaneously in Kazakh military shipyards, hegemony manufacturing centers, and Talkesh quantum foundries, the massive vessel incorporated defensive technologies from 37 different species. Its crew of 12,000 represented every major civilization in the United Galactic Defense. "Quantum barriers at full strength," reported Nexus Singer of Deep Harmonies from the Talkesh Technical Station. "Consciousness protection field extends to maximum effective range. However, enemy effects are penetrating outer layers at rate of approximately 3% per hour." Elena felt a chill at the report. The most advanced protective systems in the galaxy were being slowly eroded by an enemy that attacked thought itself. The Consciousness Eaters possessed capabilities that challenged the fundamental assumptions of physics and biology. Signal from the Hegemony Economic Analysis Division, added Supreme Director Vexhallen through neural link from her specialized command center. "Resource calculations indicate current defensive expenditure is sustainable for approximately 4 months at maximum intensity. Recommend transitioning to conservation protocols." Elena shook her head. "No conservation yet. We need to understand what we're fighting before we start rationing our response." The first direct engagement came at the rimward system of Kepler 442, ironically the same region where Elena had first encountered the dying Verdani ship decades earlier. A combined fleet of 200 vessels from 12 species moved to intercept 3 Consciousness Eater entities that were approaching an inhabited world. Elena watched the engagement through long-range sensors, her heart heavy with the knowledge that she was sending thousands of beings into battle against an enemy that didn't fully understand. The fleet was commanded jointly by Kazakh war leader Thrax Prime and Hegemony Strategic Coordinator Malthani, their combined expertise representing the best military minds in the galaxy. "Fleet reports initial contact," announced Commander Park. "Enemy entities are difficult to target. They seem to exist partially outside normal space-time." The tactical display showed the Allied fleet moving in a formation as 3 dark voids approached their position. The Consciousness Eaters didn't maneuver like conventional ships. Instead, they seemed to fold space around themselves, moving through dimensions that conventional sensors could barely detect. "Kazakh vessels are opening fire," reported the tactical officer. "Hegemony ships are coordinating with focused particle beams. Verdani bioships are attempting to analyze enemy composition through direct neural interface." Elena held her breath as the first exchange of fire commenced. The Allied fleet's weapons seemed to strike the Consciousness Eaters but had no visible effect. Energy beams passed through the entities as if they weren't entirely present in normal space. Missile strikes registered contact, but produced no damage indicators. Then the entities struck back. Fleet reports massive consciousness pressure, Commander Park said, her voice showing strain as she fought off the mental effects even at their extreme range. 70% of crews are experiencing cognitive disruption. Verdani bioships are changing. Elena's worst fears were realized as she watched the tactical display show 3 Verdani vessels breaking formation. Their bioorganic hulls were shifting color and configuration as the Consciousness Eater's influence converted living ship systems to their control. All ships implement emergency consciousness protocols, Elena ordered. Activate the hybrid protection systems. The emergency protocols were another product of unprecedented cooperation. Human neural dampening technology combined with crystalline hierarchy, mental shielding, and Talkesh quantum consciousness barriers. The systems had never been tested in actual combat, but they represented the best protection the galaxy could devise. Protective systems are holding, reported Nexus Singer with what might have been relief. Consciousness pressure reduced by 73%. However, converted Verdani ships are now attacking our fleet. Elena watched in horror as ships that had been allies moments before turned their bioweapons against their former comrades. The Consciousness Eaters hadn't destroyed the vessels. They had claimed them, turning advanced galactic technology against its creators. Fleet is withdrawing to secondary defensive positions, reported Commander Park. Casualties are significant. We lost contact with 47 ships, and another 63 are showing signs of consciousness infiltration. Elena felt the weight of command pressing down on her as she realized the magnitude of the threat they faced. The Consciousness Eaters could turn their own forces against them, making every engagement potentially catastrophic regardless of the initial balance of power. Signal the fleet to fall back to the inner system, Elena ordered. We need time to analyze what we learned. The retreat from Kepler 442 was a strategic disaster, but it provided crucial information about their enemy. Over the following weeks, scientists and military analysts from every species in the UGD worked around the clock to understand the Consciousness Eater's capabilities and develop countermeasures. Dr. Grove Mother Bright Canopy, now the chief xenobiological researcher for the Alliance, presented her findings to Elena's senior staff. The entities don't function like conventional life forms. They appear to be quantum consciousness given semi-physical form, existing simultaneously across multiple dimensions. Their attack on sentience is not metaphorical. They literally consume the quantum patterns that create awareness. Elena studied the data with growing unease. Can our current defenses stop them? Temporarily, yes, but they adapt to our protective measures. Each engagement teaches them how to overcome our barriers more efficiently. Chief Engineer Santos, now commanding the UGD Technical Development Division, added his analysis. The converted ships maintain their original capabilities while gaining new ones that violate known physics. They can phase through solid matter at will and seem to communicate through quantum entanglement across unlimited distances. Elena felt a moment of despair as the scope of the challenge became clear. They were facing an enemy that could adapt to their defenses, convert their own forces against them, and communicate instantly across galactic distances. Traditional military doctrine was useless against such capabilities. But then she remembered something from her years of building the Kindred Compact. The greatest victories had come not from superior force, but from unexpected cooperation and innovative thinking. What if we're approaching this wrong? Elena said suddenly. We're thinking about this as a military problem, but what if it's actually a consciousness problem? The entities attack sentience itself. What if we need to defend with enhanced sentience rather than weapons? Bright Leaf, who had been present for every major breakthrough in human-alien cooperation, immediately understood Elena's thinking. Link the consciousness protection systems across the entire fleet. Create a gestalt intelligence that's too complex for the entities to consume. Nexus Singer of Deep Harmonies added the Talkesh perspective. Quantum consciousness networks could theoretically create awareness patterns that exist across multiple dimensional layers simultaneously. Such complexity might be indigestible to entities accustomed to consuming individual minds. Supreme Director Vex Allen's Economic Modeling Division ran projections on the proposal. Resource requirements would be enormous, but success probability shows marked improvement over current defensive strategies. Elena made the decision that would define the final battle for galactic civilization. Signal all UGD fleets to fall back to the galactic core. We're going to link every consciousness in the Alliance into a single defensive network. The next 6 months saw the most ambitious project in galactic history. Every inhabited world in the Alliance contributed to the construction of quantum consciousness networks that linked billions of minds across thousands of light years. The networks didn't merge individual consciousness, but created resonance patterns that strengthened and protected awareness through collective complexity. The Talkesh provided the quantum infrastructure, their ancient technology adapted to support consciousness rather than simple communication. The Verdani contributed living neural networks that could process and filter the mental energies of entire planets. The crystalline hierarchy created processing nodes that could handle the computational load of Gestalt intelligence. Humans provided the critical element that made the system possible, the ability to cooperate across species boundaries. Elena's decades of building trust and understanding between different civilizations had created the cultural framework necessary for such unprecedented mental cooperation. Emperor Thax IX surprised everyone by volunteering his personal consciousness as a primary node in the network. If Kazakh military might cannot defeat these entities directly, then Kazakh will contribute to their defeat indirectly. Victory requires all advantages. The final battle came when the Consciousness Eaters reached the galactic core, their numbers having grown to over 1,000 entities through the consumption of rim civilizations. They approached Nexus Prime, expecting to find scattered resistance from individual species fighting separately. Instead, they encountered something unprecedented in their millions of years of existence, a unified galactic consciousness that spanned dimensions and included the awareness patterns of trillions of sentient beings. Elena stood in the command center of the Unity's dawn as the entities made contact with the consciousness network. Her individual awareness was simultaneously herself and part of something vastly larger, connected to every other mind in the Alliance while retaining her own identity. Contact initiated, she announced, her voice carrying harmonics from a dozen different species as the network spoke through her. They're attempting to consume the network nodes. But the Consciousness Eaters, for all their power, had never encountered prey that fought back through unity rather than weapons. The network's complexity grew exponentially with each attempt at consumption, creating feedback loops that overwhelmed the entity's ability to digest awareness. "They're retreating," reported Bright Leaf, her voice carrying amazement. "The entities are withdrawing beyond sensor range." Elena felt a surge of triumph through the network, the combined joy of trillions of beings who had just witnessed the impossible. The Consciousness Eaters, unstoppable devourers that had consumed the predecessors themselves, had been turned back.